Come Friday, and all eyes will be on Karnataka Chief Minister Siddaramaiah, who's all set to present his 14th budget, a record of sorts for him in his political career. So, what's so special about this budget, other than the fact that it is the first budget of the newly formed Congress government after it won the Karnataka Assembly elections? This budget is said to be the most challenging yet for Siddaramaiah personally and politically. Fiscally prudent budgets have always been Siddaramaiah's passion project of sorts. And in this budget, mopping up funds to allocate for the five poll promises of the Congress has proven to be a Herculean task, and all of that comes at a cost. On this episode of State of Play, I tell you all about this budget and how finances are being managed to ensure the government is able to deliver on its promise, and at what cost do these promises come. Welcome to the show. I am Anusha Ravi Sood. Successive governments in Karnataka have been meticulous, have been dedicated and committed to presenting budgets that are within the framework of the Fiscal Responsibility Act of 2002. Under the Fiscal Responsibility Act, there are three main components. The budget has to be a revenue surplus budget, fiscal deficit should be under 3% of the GSTP, and total liabilities, borrowings, etc., has to be under 25% of the GSTP. Except for 2 years during the pandemic, Karnataka has, in the last few years, always managed to present budgets that adhere to the Fiscal Responsibility Act norms. This time around, things look very different. To implement the Congress's five poll promises, Shakti, Grihajyoti, Grihalakshmi, Annabhagya and Yuvanidhi, the government may need around 60,000 crores annually. We are in the midst of a fiscal year, so for this fiscal year, we may not need as much funds to implement these schemes. The allocation could be, or requirement could be much lesser. However, despite that, there isn't simply enough revenue surplus in Karnataka estimated for this year to fund these poll promises. Revenue surplus is when a state's revenue receipts are in the form of state's own taxes, non-tax revenues, grant and aids from the union government, devolution of funds, etc. When these incomes, when these receipts are exceeding the committed expenditure of the state government, which committed expenditure could mean salaries, pensions, welfare schemes, interest payments, etc. When revenue receipts are much higher than the committed expenditure, which is revenue expenditure of the state government, then you have a revenue surplus budget. It is considered fiscally prudent and economically wise to fund welfare schemes, to consider welfare schemes. The five poll guarantees of the Congress will be categorized as welfare schemes. To consider these welfare schemes as committed expenditure, and money is allocated from revenue receipts since they are considered revenue expenditure. Borrowings that come under capital receipts generally add to the state's liabilities, and those borrowings are only meant for capital expenditure, which means infrastructure, asset building, etc., which will bring returns in the long term. But here is how the numbers look currently. Right before the Karnataka Assembly elections, then Chief Minister Basavaraj Bommai presented an interim budget, also known as the vote on accounts, which pretty much details the current financial status of Karnataka. According to that vote on account, for this fiscal year 2023-2024, Karnataka is estimated to have revenue receipts of 2.25 lakh crore. Out of this 2.25 lakh crore, committed expenditure or expenditure that the state government has to make is about 2,07,000 crore rupees, which is about 92% of the total revenue receipts, which means any scheme, any government can only fund another 8% from this particular revenue receipt towards any scheme that it comes up with, towards any new scheme. So 8% of 2.25 lakh crore rupees estimated to be the revenue receipts for Karnataka leaves any government with just about 18,000 crore rupees. But let's remember, implementing the five poll guarantees of the Congress government is estimated to cost around 60,000 crore rupees annually. So you see, there simply isn't enough revenue surplus to fund these poll guarantees independently. There are ways with which the state government can dramatically increase its revenue. Simple and straight, everybody would understand increasing taxes. Taxes like property tax, professional tax, excise, even that comes under the state government. The state government can increase taxes that will lead to higher revenue for the state. Another way the state government hopes to mobilize income is by plugging leakages, by ensuring that annual targets for multiple departments, say under the revenue ministry, is increased, whether it's transport, whether it is stamps and registration. Increasing annual targets is something that the state government is looking as an option to ensure there is more revenue coming in. Hiking existing taxes or increasing slabs on taxes, including, say, something like a fuel tax. These are moves that are sure to invite criticism from citizens. But tax buoyancy is something that the state government is hoping will help it increase or mop up funds this time. The fact that the GST compensation that was being doled out to states over the last 5 years has ended with last fiscal, and this year onwards, state governments will not get GST compensation from the union government is definitely not helping Karnataka's finances this time around. So, because there is not enough revenue surplus to fund these poll guarantees, the next best option, the next logical option is borrowing. Borrowing money in the form of capital receipts to fund these poll promises, a move that is not considered to be fiscally prudent. As per the voter count presented for 2023-2024 for Karnataka by Basavaraj Bommai before the elections, the total liabilities estimated for this year for Karnataka is about 5,64,000 crore rupees. That's about 24.2% of the total GSTP. And like I said, according to the Fiscal Responsibility Act, total liabilities of Karnataka should not cross 25% of the total GSTP. Although the total liabilities presented by Basavaraj Bommai in the last vote on accounts or the interim budget that he presented right before the election also included the estimated borrowings that his government would have taken, the Siddaramaiah government can always move that around, can allocate it elsewhere, can choose not to borrow or borrow more. Despite all that, just going by the numbers presented for 2023-2024 estimates of Karnataka, any state government is left with just about 18,000 crore rupees to borrow before we violate the Fiscal Responsibility Act. There are other ways of borrowing from the open market. Take, for example, off budget borrowings that can be done through infrastructure boards, through development boards, etc. While they can be a short term measure, it is truly like opening up a Pandora's box when you look at it long term. Take, for example, Kerala. Kerala's infrastructure boards, welfare boards, or development boards have been borrowing off the budget so heavily that the state is now facing a financial crunch. The union government has slashed Kerala's total borrowing capacities. It has led to such a situation where Kerala is not even able to pay out its pensions for beneficiaries. Officials of several departments have suggested cutting down on existing schemes that this government or this administration may deem redundant. Suggestions have already been made to subsume existing smaller schemes into umbrella schemes. Schemes, for example, the Basavaraj Bommai government had announced a zero ticket or a free bus travel option or a scheme for women in working women in particular sectors. Now, under the Shakti scheme, since all women in Karnataka can travel at zero fare tickets, that particular scheme can be subsumed into the umbrella scheme. These are some of the suggestions that officials have given. The finance department has categorically stated the limitations with which the government will have to consider funding these five poll guarantees. Despite all these measures, the cost of implementing these five poll guarantees could lead to Karnataka government violating the Fiscal Responsibility Act of 2002. This will be a first for Siddaramaiah, if it is so. This will be a first for Siddaramaiah as Chief Minister. Siddaramaiah has always taken great pride in his ability to look at budget prudently, ensure that the budgets that he's presented are fiscally prudent. Even as the leader of the opposition, he's demanded the same of then ruling parties as well. To his credit, when Siddaramaiah presented the first budget 2004-2005, right after the implementation of the Karnataka Fiscal Responsibility Act, he presented a revenue surplus budget for the first time in 8 years. Since the implementation of the Karnataka Fiscal Responsibility Act, Siddaramaiah, whenever he has presented a budget, has always ensured that the budgets he presents are in tune with the Karnataka Fiscal Responsibility Act. All of them adhere to all three components or the compulsions of the Karnataka Fiscal Responsibility Act. Given that this is the record he holds, Friday's budget is sure to be the most challenging yet for Siddaramaiah. We at South First will bring you the latest updates on the same. Do stay tuned. Thank you so much for watching.